This is the story of how a handful of skateboarders with rented camcorders ended up deciding which bands would define alternative rock, years before TV ever caught up. In 1988, a San Diego skate team called H Street released a video called Shackle Me Not. H Street had been founded 2 years earlier by pro skaters Tony Mag and Mike Ternaski, and their video paired raw close-up skate footage with a soundtrack of loud, unpolished punk rock nobody outside the scene had heard of. It looked cheap, it sounded cheap, and it is widely credited as the birth of the modern skate video, the template that every skate company would copy for the next decade. That template had one rule buried inside it that nobody wrote down. Whatever song played under a skater's best trick became the song 100,000 teenagers went looking for at the record store the next week. For most of the 80s, that meant hardcore punk. Bands like Black Flag and JFA soundtracked skating because skating and garage punk were already living in the same garages, the same backyards, the same broke teenage economy. But by the start of the 1990s, hardcore was running out of gas. Its biggest bands were breaking up, and skateboarding itself was changing, moving off the vert ramps and into the streets, which meant the soundtrack needed to change with it. The technology caught up at exactly the right moment. Sony released the VX1000 camcorder, a camera that used small mini DV tapes instead of the bulky formats that came before it. It was portable, it was relatively affordable, and it was easy enough that any skater with a friend willing to film could make something that looked professional. Almost overnight, skate videos stopped being expensive productions handled by a company's in-house music director and started being made by teenagers with a camera and a record collection. The fisheye lens that shows up in nearly every skate video from that decade forward exists because of this camera. So does the explosion of soundtrack choices that followed it. In 1991, the skateboard brand Blind released Video Days. It was directed by a young filmmaker named Spike Jonze, and it starred a writer named Jason Lee. Video Days did something nobody had really tried before. It treated skating like a music video, cutting fast, matching the editing rhythm to the song instead of just playing a song underneath footage. It became one of the most influential skate videos ever made, and it made Jonze a name inside the skate world years before anyone outside that world had heard of him. A year later, a company called World Industries released a video called Love Child, and it made an even stranger choice. Instead of punk, its soundtrack leaned on funk, soul, and Motown tracks from the 1960s and 70s, music that was considered pure oldies at the time and completely unfamiliar to the teenagers buying the tape. Kids who had never touched their parents' record collection suddenly started raiding them, looking for whatever obscure soul cut had scored their favorite skater's part. That same year, Plan B released Questionable, and Mike Carroll's part in it introduced an entire generation of skaters to the Beastie Boys and to a group of underground Bay Area rappers called Hieroglyphics. A single skate part had become a functioning discovery engine for genres that had nothing to do with skateboarding at all. None of this happened in a vacuum either. A few years earlier, a scrappy ska punk band called Operation Ivy had barely lasted long enough to release one full album before splitting apart, but their songs kept turning up in skate video after skate video through the late 80s, and the exposure turned a band that most of America had never heard of into a full-blown cult phenomenon inside skate culture specifically. When two of its members went on to form Rancid, the band arrived already carrying an audience that had been built almost entirely through rewound skate footage, not radio play. That is the exact mechanism this whole story runs on. A skate part does not need permission from a program director, it just needs a kid willing to hit rewind. This is the part that gets missed when people tell skateboarding's history through tricks alone. In the years before Spotify, before YouTube, before anyone could stream a song on demand, a skate video was one of the only curated playlists a teenager in a landlocked suburb ever encountered. If a song showed up under a trick that got rewound and watched 100 times on a friend's VCR, that song had cultural weight that no radio station could manufacture. Skateboarders were not trying to be tastemakers, they were just trying to make their friends look as good as possible on camera, but the side effect was an entire underground distribution network for music, running completely outside the record industry's control. Dinosaur Jr. is maybe the clearest example of how far this reached. For more than 30 years, their music has shown up in skate videos from Santa Cruz, Blind, Toy Machine, and Transworld again and again, introducing new generations of skaters to a band that never needed radio play to stay relevant inside the culture. Every time a company needed a song that sounded like distortion and heartbreak at the same time, Dinosaur Jr. was already sitting in someone's video folder, and Skate Kids kept the band's catalog alive for skaters who were not even born when the songs first came out. And then the line between the two worlds disappeared completely. In 1992, Sonic Youth needed a director for the music video for their single, 100%. They hired Spike Jonze, the same director who had just made Video Days for Blind Skateboards, and the video featured Jason Lee, the same skater who had starred in it. A band that stood at the center of American alternative rock had just hired a skateboard video director to shoot their music video and cast an actual professional skater in it. The wall between skate videos and alternative rock music videos had not just been crossed, it had been erased by the same two people who built it in the first place. It helps to understand exactly why Jonze was the obvious choice for that job in the first place. Video Days had not just used music as background noise, it had cut skating to the rhythm of the song the way a music video cuts a performance to a beat, which meant Jonze already had on his resume actual proof that he could make skateboarding look like the same kind of visual art form that alternative rock's best videos were reaching for. Hiring him for Sonic Youth was not a favor or a gimmick. It was a label recognizing that the most interesting visual language in youth culture at that moment had been invented, almost by accident, inside skate videos nobody in the music industry had bothered to watch. Look at the timing here because it matters. 1992 is the same year Nirvana's Nevermind had already flipped the entire music industry upside down, and every label in America was scrambling to find whatever counted as the next alternative breakthrough. Grunge was already starting to calcify into a formula, radio was chasing a sound instead of a scene, and the bands that had actually built the underground infrastructure of American alternative music, bands like Dinosaur Jr., Sonic Youth, and the hardcore adjacent scene around them, needed a channel that still felt authentic to the kids who had been there from the start. Skate videos were exactly that channel. They were untouched by radio programmers, untouched by major label marketing plans, made by teenagers for other teenagers, and they reached a demographic that was young, broke, obsessive, and about to define what counted as cool for the rest of the decade. NOFX rode that same underground current all the way to arenas without ever softening the sound that got them into those videos in the first place. They did not need a traditional radio hit to build an audience. They needed a well-placed trick, a rewound VHS tape, and a fan base of skaters who trusted a video part soundtrack more than they trusted anything coming out of a car radio. By the middle of the 1990s, skate companies understood exactly what they were sitting on. A soundtrack choice was not just background noise anymore, it was a marketing decision as important as who rode for the team. Girl Skateboards brought Spike Jonze back in 1996 to direct Mouse, cementing the relationship between skate video direction and the kind of visual language that alternative music videos were also chasing at the time. Toy Machine's Welcome to Hell, released the same year, kept pushing heavier, darker music into the mix, proving the pipeline worked in more than one direction at once, pulling from hardcore, from noise rock, from anything that matched the intensity of what was happening on the board. That underground pipeline did not stop once the 1990s ended either. When file sharing services spread in the following decade, skaters used them to trade footage and soundtracks the same way earlier generations had traded VHS tapes hand to hand at the skate shop, keeping the same bands in circulation for kids who had not even been born when Video Days first came out. Decades later, filmmakers like William Strobeck, working with skate teams tied to Supreme, kept using music the exact same way Jonze once did, treating a soundtrack choice as a statement about identity rather than filler. The mechanism Shackle Me Not and Video Days, accidentally invented in the early 90s, never actually went away. It just kept finding new tape formats to live on. None of this was planned by a record label or a radio consultant. It was built by teenagers with rented camcorders who just wanted their friends' tricks to look as good as possible, and it ended up doing something that most professional music marketing departments could only dream of. It kept alternative rock feeling dangerous and real for an entire generation of kids who had grown suspicious of anything that felt manufactured. Skateboarding did not save alternative rock by accident. It saved it by refusing the whole time to care whether anyone outside its own scene was paying attention at all.